The Sunset Strip Diaries, Chapter 12, Dodging Bullets. Trisha introduced me to a dancer named Willa, who had once lived in her apartment building but had since moved to Hollywood. She was fair-skinned with long, wavy, platinum blonde hair and bright red lipstick. She had big, sparkly blue eyes and a gorgeous smile. My next friend crush formed instantly. I joined her and Trisha on a few nights out, and then I started going out with Willa on my own. She loved to go to the Rainbow and dance, something I had never done. I was a horrible dancer, so in order to loosen up, I needed 25 Long Island iced teas. The dance floor at the Rainbow was sunken down 5 stairs and was dark, so that made it a little bit easier. It had a railing that I could hang on to while flipping my hair around, trying not to fall. Willa propped me up half the time. We always requested the Prince song, Erotic City, and at some point they started playing it when we walked into the room. I felt all cool. Other than that song, I heard a lot of the Red Hot Chili Peppers' new album, Blood Sugar Sex Magic. The songs Give It Away and Under the Bridge were big around that time. I also remember that one night the bouncers made everyone leave the Rainbow so Guns N' Roses could film a portion of their November Rain video in the red booths. It didn't come out until that summer. We were totally irritated to have to cut our night short. We stumbled outside and saw that a portion of Sunset Boulevard was also shut down for the shoot. We had to move the party elsewhere. Willa taught me some social etiquette. For one, she taught me to tip the cocktail waitresses when they brought my drinks. I had never heard of such a thing. I knew nothing about tipping, probably because I rarely bought my own drinks, but it was good to know. Willa was also a pro at scamming drinks off strangers, which was part 2 of her etiquette lesson. One must be able to secure herself a certain amount of cocktails for the pleasure of her company. I watched her work the older men. Her face lit up and she looked like she was really interested in them, while they forked over drinks. When she had had enough cocktails, her face dropped and her eyes went dead and she moved on. It's kind of frightening, really, like an evil robot or a Stepford wife. I had never seen a face change so drastically, but that was what was called survival mode in the world of dancers. They will do whatever it takes. If they don't learn that charm, another girl will take their customer, i.e. their money. It was the work of a true hustler. She was blonde and paid for everything, 2 things I required in a friend at that time. She got us cabs to clubs, bought or swindled us drinks, and paid for my food if I ever needed any. She originally said she was in public relations, which I knew was not true because of Trisha, but I didn't say anything. Who was I to make her uncomfortable? After hanging out with her a bit, she admitted to being a dancer. I had hung out with other girls who had danced, so I didn't question it any further. I was a little thrown off by her figure, though. If you looked past her beauty, she was not in great shape. She had no chest, kind of a big shapeless butt, and no waist. She hid it all very well by wearing a lot of black. I was puzzled as to how she made any good money dancing. It just did not add up. There was a lot of competition out there, especially in Hollywood, where the prettiest girls in the world danced. As we got closer, she confided in me a little bit more, admitting that she made $1,100 in one night by letting some old guy spank her. She said the first thing she did was buy hundreds of dollars worth of groceries and fill up her cupboards and fridge. She had been living on top ramen for months and was so delighted to go and buy beautiful jams and jellies, French pastries, Italian sparkling waters, and gorgeous cuts of steak and fresh berries. I didn't judge her. I remember that some of the other dancers I knew had a regular from who they would make side money. They always painted a picture of something harmless that had nothing to do with sex. Oh, I just walked over him in high heels, or oh, he just wanted to be yelled at, things like that. I figured Willa was just doing the same thing, and I didn't ask her any more about it. I never asked any of the girls what they did for money. I knew that would make them uneasy and unable to trust me. I handled Willa in the same way. We were to have fun. We were to laugh, dance, flirt, drink, and forget our troubles. Trisha's French boyfriend, Pierre, hated Willa. We were both over at Trisha's apartment one day, and I overheard Pierre threatening Willa with something. My ears perked up. In a low, quiet voice, she turned very vicious toward him, and he shut up real quick. She threatened to tell Trisha all about him. All about him? What did she know? I wasn't sure what she had on him, but I was impressed at the way she had him shaking in his boots. I had never seen a woman pull that off in real life, only on Dynasty or Dallas, of course. Willa always seemed to be putting men in their place in a shocking fashion. Once again, her deep blue eyes would be happy and smiley one minute until someone tried to scam her. Her eyes snapped into this piercing stare, and she would say crazy things like, "Do you want to fuck with me? Because I don't think you want to fuck with me, so-and-so. I will fucking destroy you, so you need to shut the fuck up." I thought I had fallen in love. I wanted to be like that. She was so beautiful and fun, but she would cold fuck you up if you crossed her. I craved protection, so I clung to her. I wished I had known her earlier in my life, so I could have let her loose on my old gynecologist and half a dozen other guys. She would have torn them to shreds and had a cocktail afterwards. I noticed that a new crowd was starting to spread on the strip at that time. They were from Seattle, and they were still considered glam guys at that point, but they were different. They were very angry. And they were into drugs, mainly heroin. They were a dirty crowd. The girls were not blonde California girls. They were pasty with black hair. Some of them were still very pretty, but they were more goth or punk tinged. I did not like that crowd. They were not glamorous enough for me. I preferred to keep company with the most beautiful, most popular people I could find, so I avoided those misfits. I had probably spent a year or so glossing them over and not giving them the time of day, because around 1992 I noticed that there was a group of people who knew who I was and did not like me. They said I was a snob and that I thought I was hot. And I was like, "And you are?" A few months passed. My grandmother started dating a new man and she wanted her space. It had been 3 years that we lived with her in the tiny Canoga Park house, and she told my mom it was time for us to go. It really was time. There were still roaches scattering in the house when you turned on a light. My room was full of smelly clothes that needed to be laundered, stale pretzels that I had thrown in my ceiling fan to watch them break, stacks of magazines and records and God knows what else. And my sister's feet always smelled like cheese popcorn, so that scent was not helping the ambiance in the house when my grandmother was trying to date. Both my sister and I blasted music very loud. I got phone calls at all hours of the night. I would have booted us out too. We moved from my grandmother's house into a house in Northridge, still in the valley. It was a good-sized house, and my mother received some sort of smoking deal. I think she only paid $700 a month, and we all got our own rooms. Because I had turned 18, I had to start paying my mother rent. I chose the smallest of the rooms for $200 a month. My mom had her eye on me, letting me stay only as long as I behaved. I started hanging out with Raz again. He was no longer friends with Darren Tyler. Darren had stopped dating the rock star's wife and took up with another dancer. We had never seen him so sprung on anyone. He was totally in love with this chick, a green-eyed brunette. Raz was dating the girl's friend, and they all had spent a lot of time together holed up in the house rolling on ecstasy. There was some point where Darren's girl and Raz hooked up. Raz blamed the drugs and felt terrible afterward, but Darren never forgave him. The chick who this was, incidentally, was one of the girls on the inside cover of Poison's Open Up and Say Ah album, if you want to dig that out and go look for it. Raz's new partner in crime was his old friend, Teddy St. John, who was there at the beach on the night I lost my virginity. I would not even have remembered it was him if he hadn't reminded me. Anyhow, he was actually really funny and had a very low voice like a DJ. He was Greek, with very wide-set eyes, black spiky hair like Nikki Sixx, very nice smooth pale skin, and huge lips. He was really tall. I wouldn't say he was thin. He wasn't fat, but he just looked regular. Okay, fine, some days he could get a little chubby if he wasn't watching it. He had known all of the guys I knew since they were teenagers. Teddy and Raz were a little more upscale than the glamour punks or Alley Cat Scratch. They had jobs and cars and nice clothing. They bought me all my drinks, made sure the doormen took care of me wherever we went. The glamour punks and Alley Cat Scratch passed me the community bottle of Jim Beam at trashy parties in random apartment buildings, wearing the same clothes they wore the night before. Cars? Yeah, right. Jobs? Please. Journal entry, February 13th, 1992. Went to hang with Robbie Black last night. Well, hang with him in a crowd of people, really. Strange lost a $250 contact lens when we were on the way to some girl's house. He was all upset the whole night. When we got back to Alley Cat's apartment 4 hours later, he got down on his hands and knees in a bunch of debris by the elevator and found the contact lens. I don't mean just a few crumbs on the floor. I mean like broken plaster and rocks. There was a broken wall. How does somebody find a tiny clear piece of glass while completely drunk at that? We were screaming at the miraculous sight. We drank a lot at the apartment, and I woke up at 4 in the morning in a sitting position on their couch. There was a Clint Eastwood movie on. Michael and Strange were sleeping on the other broken couches. I cleared a path through all the beer cans and bailed. Robbie looked like he would be a dick. This is not the journal anymore, guys. Back to the story. Robbie looked like he would be a dick because he was so attractive, but the truth was he was a little bit shy. Women were mobbing him all the time, and he almost didn't know how to handle it. Tricia came out with me the next night, and she saw him, and she screamed at me with a bit of a British accent from her mother. He is gorgeous! Oh my God! Jimmy's band's songs started playing on the radio at that time. They started doing photo shoots. Raz and Teddy were impressed, which made me roll my eyes at how easily they were swayed from thinking he was out of style, ugly, and uncool. Robbie commented that he liked the band as well. I was doubly annoyed. One weekend I went to a party with the Glamour Punks, where Dizzy Damage, who would sadly pass away a few years later, started violently throwing bananas. Then he did a flying leap onto a dining room table, sending all of its contents crashing to the ground. Alcohol bottles are very loud when breaking, so it was a great scene. It was at that party that Michael introduced me to a new dancer he and Strange were living with, a girl named Colette. She was tall and brunette, sort of a Sandra Bullock type. I had heard she was a rival of Missy's through the grapevine. They had dated the same guy at some point, and they did not like each other. I went to visit Raz one night soon thereafter. He had moved back to the condo with Dusty and good old Holly, who spent that particular night puking for hours on end. I stood there with a bowl while he wiped his face and blew his nose. I held back his hair like a girl. Later he started crying really, really hard. It was horrible. I wanted to hug him and hold him. The guy always seemed so miserable. Raz, not fazed by his friend's sickness and sadness, started looking me up and down and told me I looked really good and that I blew Missy away. What? He usually critiqued me, telling me I was overweight or I needed some laminates in my hair or something like that. He made me step back, he looked me over and said Jimmy had been a lucky guy. I was shocked because he was my friend and it made me a little bit uneasy. Where was this coming from? Then he said I was his little sister and he wasn't letting anybody mess with me even 10 times more than before. Then he handed me a bottle of nail polish and put his thumb on the table. I laughed and painted his nails. I partied with Tweety from Big Bang Babies the next week and got more of a peek into his life. I was completely fascinated by him because he seemed to be the only person in all of Hollywood who was in on a big joke. He didn't take himself too seriously. He was always calmly dragging on that cigarette and never worried about a thing. He was there to have fun. His life did not depend on being signed to a record label like the rest of them. It was as if he saw an opening to where he could live the good life, and he was smart enough to capitalize on it. Journal entry, March 22nd, 1992. If I ever mention Tweety again, slap me. His blonde girlfriend is some rich chick, one of the La Fabula twins, whoever they are. She looks like an old film star, platinum white Jean Harlow hair, long fake eyelashes, big boobs and hips, plump cheeks, glamorous clothes. I thought her name was Gypsy at first, but it's Tipsy. Tipsy La Fabula. She has a house up in Laurel Canyon. Tweety gets everything he wants, I am sure. I will never have a chance with him. Strange and I climbed the gnarly old stone stairway up the ivy-covered hills to their house the other night. We had to duck under rails and step over potted plants, finally coming onto a deck that led to the front door. The first thing I saw in the living room were a bunch of blonde wigs on styrofoam heads that were perched on the mantel over the fireplace. There were black rabbits running freely around the room amongst piles of board games, and all of the clocks were set to different times. It was like Alice in Wonderland. "I call this the do room," said Tweety, giving us a tour of the place, "because I don't know what to do with it." He gave a wave of his hand over the room and inhaled in his cigarette. I peeked into a bathroom that had an old-fashioned footed tub. A winding staircase led down to more rooms, most of which were empty. Once we got back upstairs, Tweety announced he was going to make the living room into a haunted house just to freak people out. He pointed to a little bat hanging from the ceiling. "See, I already started." Tipsy and bare feet in a long 1930s evening gown stepped over a low lacquered table and invited us to sit down. We sat on pillows on the black and white checked floor as a bunny hopped by on soft paws. Tweety brought out a deli platter that he had arranged with little sword toothpicks. Tipsy sipped a cocktail and held up the glass to show a straw that changed colors from purple to pink. He buys such necessary things when he goes shopping. Kit Ashley, Tweety's bandmate from Big Bang Babies, showed up with a petite platinum blonde girl with crystal blue eyes. He dropped her hand and came straight to me. "Strange, is this your action?" "No, she's my really good friend." "Who are you?" he said, staring in my eyes. "Oh my Gad, marry me. Are those your real eyes?" He kept trying to paw me, and I removed his hands. I was drunk, but I do remember Tweety saying, "Someday I would eventually like to learn how to play the bass." No matter that he already played his bass to unsuspecting, screaming crowds on the weekends who thought he was a god. "It's good enough how it is right now. I don't really want to be a musician. I just want everything that comes with it." Journal entry, March 29th, 1992. Willa's apartment is a mess. Colette's is thrashed. Spending all of that time at their places makes me appreciate the clean palace of luxury I live in right now. Okay, fine, so it's a little house in the valley. So what? My mom cleans and there's food in the fridge. I can never move to Hollywood. I would lose it and become like all of them. They don't have plates. They don't have food to put on plates. They live in pigsties. People come in and out of their apartments, sleeping on floors or on furniture, if there is any. Being at these girls' places makes me ill. So trashy and dirty with bugs and backed up garbage disposals and bathrooms full of hair. I was partying a lot, but I still had something in my life that made me feel secure no matter what happened. Jimmy. I still did love him, and I knew in my heart that I would always have him there. I had felt comforted to know he loved me in the midst of all the chaos. We were very on again, off again. We had so many breakups I didn't even mention them all here. We always got back together until one day in April of 1992. Willa was old enough to get into the cat house. One day she told me she saw Jimmy there, while he was dating me, ferociously making out with a girl who he had pinned to the wall. I was stunned. I felt a stab in my heart. I was so guilty all of the time about my own flirtations. I never considered that he would do such a thing. I felt like an idiot. It never occurred to me that would happen to me. I always thought he was so in love with me he would never look at another woman. Well, I was a fool. Although I had no business even being mad at him, considering all the guys I hung around and the fact that I did have an affair with Roxy, I was still really shattered. And I was also very grateful to hear the truth and did not shoot the messenger. Willa told me it wasn't just Jimmy who was a cheater. Pierre had cheated on Trisha. With her. She said she slept with him in the laundry room of his apartments. That made me feel queasy. I thought Pierre was totally in love with Trisha. Was this what all these guys were like? Is this what men were like? Just like my dad? I knew that men were wired to want to be with a lot of women, but it still seemed shocking. Was I that naive? It was at that point I truly ended my 2-year relationship with Jimmy. I was very, very heartbroken, believe it or not. Even though my life was completely different than it was in the beginning of our relationship, I was still very sad to hear he cheated on me while we were together. I confronted him and he admitted to not just cheating that time, but cheating all along, even when I was in the psych ward. Something inside me broke at that point. It was such a deep pain to hear that nothing we ever had was even real. Even though I had moved on to my own scene and my own life, I still held him close to my heart. He had given me love when I most needed it, when no one else around me gave a shit about me. I tried my best to not disrespect him, but I had. I was publicly disrespecting him every night, just by being in the company of so many other guys and flirting with them. Journal entry, April 11th, 1992. I went over the deep end. I'm such a lush. I feel like crying every single morning when I wake up drunk. It is degrading. Supposedly I'm the major hot item right now, but I can't enjoy it. I found out Jimmy was cheating on me the whole time we were together, and I feel really humiliated. I've been getting wasted every single night and throwing away any money that I have. I fooled around with Kid Ashley. Don't worry, I didn't do it, but I might as well have. I was completely game to sleep with Kit. I didn't care. I was so hurt and angry with Jimmy, I really was willing to do anything. Earlier that night, I had spritzed myself with perfume, threw on a lime green dress, and went to a party in the hills where I randomly ate some ice cream out of some stripper's mouth. I know. But I was in Hollywood, and that was just some normal thing, I guess. She was friends with Kit and asked me what my story was. This was after we were already sharing germs, but that's the way it went. I told her I had not slept with anybody other than my boyfriend for 2 years. Then she asked me how old I was, and I told her 18. She was concerned for some reason. Most people in Hollywood had no conscience. I didn't understand why she did. She pulled Kit over and sternly told him how old I was and that I had just broken up with someone and not to do anything stupid. I couldn't believe it, but he listened to her. I was so annoyed. Journal entry continued. I woke up in the morning, called a cab, and ditched Kit. He was like, "Where are you going? It's 7 a.m. He called me the next night and told me to be careful, not sexy. The cab brought me to my car, and then I drove to Harmony's and took him to the beach with me. He was so gentlemanly that it made me sick. We made a date for the next night, and he stood me up. So I went out with Willa and got drunker than ever. I ran into Raz, my loyal friend. We ran off together and told the entire world to fuck off. He looked at Willa with his eyebrows up and a scrunchie on his wrist, and he said, "Honey, you need to lose weight. You have no tits and you have 2 chins." I cringed. She was furious. I can't believe I did this, but I burst out laughing right in front of her because I couldn't believe what he was saying. But that's Raz for you. She was so mad at me. She started yelling at me, said she didn't want to meet any more of my friends ever again. Then Raz ran into Missy and told her off, and later he started crying because she hurt him so badly, and the cab driver told him to be a man. Then we went to the Rainbow where Raz ran into his best friend JJ and told him to fuck off as well. I was standing there egging him on, and I don't even know why. Trisha saw me on a rampage, and she looked scared, and she avoided me. At the end of the night, Raz and I drove up to some house that he was house-sitting, Sherman Hemsley's house, and we slept in his huge bed filled with white pillows. I woke up in the morning and started crying. Raz felt bad for me and tried to make light of the whole thing. "Oh my God, I told JJ to fuck off, didn't I? Oh my God, what did we do to Willa? Didn't I knock a lamp on her head? Oh shit!" I started laughing through my tears, suddenly remembering how he jumped up and hit a fluorescent light in her apartment building, and the plastic cover came down and slammed her in the head when she was already furious. "What did we do?" I asked. "We told everybody to fuck off," he said in a high-pitched shriek. "Well, I'm going to be hanging around you a lot more because no one else likes me now," I said, thinking of Trisha and Willa's faces. I was really affected by Jimmy. My reactions were extreme and my hurt was really deep. I started to feel an explosion of anger toward men in general. So Willa and her cold persona was just what I needed at that time to make me feel better. I felt solace in being around a woman who was an ice queen and took no prisoners. Raz was immune, though. He was a rare bird. I didn't care that she had no soul. She was afraid of no one, which is why she did not hesitate to tell on Jimmy. No one else who knew about him told, fearing the social repercussions, but she didn't give a fuck, and I admired that. I wanted to try out her persona to see if I liked it better than being all sunshine, glitter, and smiles. Besides, I didn't think I could smile if I even tried at that point. I was too heartbroken. I clung to Willa to the point of obsession on some days. I didn't want to be away from her, and I didn't want to lose my strength. A bunch of guys tried getting me to be their girlfriend when word hit the street that I was no longer connected to Jimmy. And even more tried sleeping with me. I had to choose someone to date. Who would it be? I went into public relations mode and picked Robbie from Alley Cat Scratch. He was safe in my mind because I didn't feel he could break my heart. I did not have a true connection with him. I never got to that place with him. He was sweet, considerate, and had been my friend for a while, not to mention he was physically one of the best-looking guys in the town. I hooked up with him eventually, and I felt empty and miserable afterwards. I was cursing myself. I knew if I started fooling around with these guys, I would go down the tubes fast. Robbie and I had a talk a few weeks later, and I told him I regretted hooking up with him, and I thought it ruined our friendship. We couldn't even look at each other anymore, and I felt even more foolish because he had acted as if we would be a couple, and then started to avoid me afterward. I was so mad at myself for being such a chump. I hadn't even really clicked with him, and I thought his personality was too nice for me. We ended up hooking up maybe 2 or 3 times after that, but nothing came of it. I started hanging out with one of the Seattle guys named Leslie Sanders. He was tall, lanky, and pale, with long pink hair and green eyes. Though I normally avoided his crowd at all costs, something struck me about him. He seemed awkward, even shy sometimes. His look was cool. He was very fashionable in the way that he presented himself. My crowd avoided his crowd even when they were at the same party. I thought if I hung out with him, I would go undetected. And I did, for the most part. I was so hurt and damaged by Jimmy's betrayal that I tried to take it out on Leslie by humiliating him every chance I got. I guess he was just in the wrong place at the wrong time. I slammed doors in his face while he was talking to me. I ate in front of him and did not ask if he was hungry. I ditched him and left him places. I slapped him across the face when I felt like it, and he kept letting me. He really liked me, and I didn't care. If he dared to say something about the way I was behaving, I would say, "Are you being a jerk?" And he would say, "No, no." I felt like shit inside, but I kept torturing him. So anyway, I didn't know what to do with myself around all these guys. I was in such a bad state that things could have gotten out of control very easily, and not only that, but I could not be away from Willa for even a day, or I would fall into a crying heap. I decided to move in with her. No matter that she lived in an apartment in a dangerous part of Hollywood with no food or furniture in it. It was on Cherokee, about a block from the Alley Cat Scratch apartment, off Yucca Street. I don't know what the hell was so irresistible about the situation. Most nights I heard gunshots and saw police helicopter spotlights shining right on our building. One time we were not allowed to leave the building because a criminal was on the loose inside. Those were the first times I ever heard real gunshots. 18th Street gang ran the neighborhood, and they were no joke. One day, Willa and I were walking to the store, and we had to fall to the ground and cover our heads, because somebody was firing shots at an armored bank truck. The sun was out, and birds were chirping, and bullets were flying. It was so crazy. Another day, while I was walking to my car, I saw a dead body covered in a white sheet on the sidewalk. But the scariest thing happened one particular night when I was driving back to the apartment after a night of partying with Willa. We were only half a block from the parking garage when a car suddenly got right on our tail and started shooting. I couldn't believe it. I thought, okay, this can't be happening. I was having fun, going to shows, writing for the school paper, and now I'm being shot at? What the fuck? I started screaming and I ducked down in the car. I couldn't stop driving or the guy would crash into me. I started crying and I was driving with my seat reclined all the way back. I couldn't even see where I was going, and I didn't crash into anything, luckily. Glass never shattered in my car, so we realized, okay, he's not shooting at us, he's hiding behind us. We heard people yelling on the street corners. He was shooting at the drug dealers. Maybe they were on his turf, or I don't know. I got us into the parking garage, and we both sat there in my car crying and scared. She told me not to look at him if we saw him outside because he would kill us if we could identify him. I started to think that maybe I was in over my head. I was quickly seeing that Hollywood was not at all glamorous, but I pushed that to the back of my mind and trudged forward. Things started to take an awkward turn once I moved in with Willa. I got the feeling I was going to have to pay the piper. She began to try to pressure me into having a relationship with her. "Yeah, ha ha ha, sure, let's be girlfriends," I said, trying to keep it light and cute. No. She wasn't talking light and cute or little pecks on the lips. She was talking real deal, doing it. She started dropping hints, walking around naked. It probably seemed like I was game for it the way I was clinging to her, but my problem was I did not know how to let someone down and still remain friends with them. I thought, okay, I do hate guys right now, and I do want to destroy every male I see, but do I like women in their place? It would have been totally acceptable in Hollywood, but the answer was no. I didn't like chicks. She became offended when I finally rebuffed her, and things started to change between us. We went to a party that spring with a guy named Bang, who was friends with the glamour punks. He was super duper tall, incredibly thin, and had a dark green mohawk that wasn't styled, just hung down on one side, showing the shaved sides of his head. He wore purple striped tights under his baggy shorts, big t-shirts, purple Doc Marten shoes, and a Sid Vicious bondage chain around his neck. He was always yelling in a New York accent, and everybody was too scared to tell him to shut the fuck up. I felt like clocking him in the head with a shovel. Anyway, that particular night in April of 1992, I drove Bang and some other guys to Rock and Roll Ralph's on Sunset to buy some Jim Beam. Some crack whore tried to solicit him in the parking lot, and he started yelling at her and calling her Toothy McSnuggle, which we found hilarious because it made absolutely no sense. She got really pissed at him and decided to kick a huge dent in my car. I was in mid-swig of the bottle of whiskey, and my eyes bugged out when I saw the commotion. The whole night was violent, even the party we went to afterward. Everybody was pushing each other and socking each other, being rowdy. The mood of the crowd was really shifting from the bubblegum nights that Michael and I shared a year or two prior. The guys were being far too rough around me, and I saw that Strange was the one egging them on. I dove for him, and we got in a huge fight, rolling around and wrestling. He pushed me into a stove at the party and tore a huge hole in my daisy print hot pants. Bang started to take over as the new party leader, introducing his musical tastes to us outdated folk. He brought a Cypress Hill cassette tape to play in my car, rewinding the song Hand on the Pump repeatedly and screaming the Duke of Earl sampling portions loud enough to break the glass on the goddamn Empire State Building back in New York. The rest of the guys got into the music too, seeming to like the new sound. The glam scene was dying before my eyes, but I was determined to continue on in Hollywood. What would become of us? Where were we headed? I saw Tweety a few days later, and he said, "I'll be your boyfriend," as if I had been begging him. I replied that I could not afford him, remembering that he said he needed at least $200 a week from a girlfriend. He said we could work on it, and he suggested I started dancing. I told him I didn't want to do something slutty like that. He said it wouldn't be slutty because I'd be coming home to him. My heart sped up at the thought of coming home to him, but I couldn't be a stripper. No way. And it wasn't that I was trying to be a good person. I was just too embarrassed to be naked in front of a crowd of people. Knowing me, I would trip and fall off the stage or like break the damn pole with my fat ass or something. He came up to me a few days later and lowered his price while dragging on a cigarette, and he didn't take his eyes off me. $100 a week, final offer. I looked at him and just walked away. But inside I thought, shit, I would do it if I had the money to spare.